the book of John today, and we're going to be looking at John chapter 6, verses 35 through 44 or 45, and we'll just get into the lesson. Let me go ahead and read here. It says, "I am the bread of life," Jesus told them. "No one comes to me will no one that comes to me will ever hunger, and no one who believes in me will ever be thirsty again. But I told you, you've seen me, and yet you do not believe. Everyone the Father gives me will come to me, and to the one who comes to me, I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose none of those that he has given me, but should raise them up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day." Therefore the Jews started complaining about him, because he said, "I am the bread that comes down from heaven." They were saying, "Isn't this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Jesus answered them, "Stop complaining among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has listened to and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father, except the one who is from God. He has seen the Father." Wow, what an amazing passage as we get started into this today. Um, I'm, I'm kind of excited. John is the kind of book that it just gets more exciting all the time. And so in this, he's talking about the bread of life that comes down from heaven in these passages. And I think that we need to really take a look and hear what is really being said. Look at John chapter 6, verse 33. It says that the bread of Yahweh, the bread of God, is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. In this verse, Yeshua, Jesus, is giving them everything that they need to know to discern who he is. And he's teaching about spiritual discernment, if you will. Look at John chapter 6, verse 38. Yeshua, Jesus says, "I have come down from heaven to do not my will, but the will of him who sent me." He's not talking about a him, a Jesus or a Yeshua thing. He's talking about that the Father sent him to do something. Both of these passages have to do with him coming down from heaven to do the will of the Father or the one who sent him. Now, if we were to leave this here and try to discern this with these verses, that we probably come up with a number of translations. But in Exodus chapter 3, verse 7 and 8, it says, Yahweh says, God says, he has heard and observed the misery of my people and has heard their cries, and he knows about their suffering. So he's hearing everything. Okay, he hears everything and he knows. So let's stop right here and pick this apart. I want to look at this in Hebrew language, if you will. In verse 7 of Exodus 3, we find the Aleph Tav three times, and in the Greek it would be the Alpha and Omega, and in Hebrew you could look at it as Aleph Tav, the first and last. Once just before misery, once before cry, and once before anguish or affliction, if you will. In the scriptures, we find those. Okay, and if you look at Revelation chapter 1, Verse 8, Yeshua, Jesus, identifies himself as the Alpha and the Omega, which are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. And in Hebrew, it would be the Aleph Toph, which are the first and last letters, if you will. Now remember, Yeshua, Jesus, is saying this about himself. If you look at Luke chapter 24, verse 27, Yeshua, Jesus interpreted, starting with Moses and the prophets, the things concerning him. So in Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, we find the Aleph Tav that are Yeshua, Jesus, and we find them before each of the miseries talked about, which means that he was going through the things his people were going through. And if you look at Matthew chapter 25, verse 41 through 45, he is intimately connected to his people. But also look at Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians. And the King James says, hand, which is better translation. So Yeshua, Jesus, has come down in this verse to rescue his people from the God of the Egyptians. And so here we find the Aleph Tav coming down to rescue his people from the hand of other gods and lead them to the land that he has promised them. Now, if you look at John chapter 10, verses 24 through 30, he rescues Israel from the hands of other gods, and no one can snatch them out of his hand. Okay? And that's important. Now let's look at John chapter 6, verse 37. Jesus says that everyone the Father gives to him will come to him. This ties in with verse 44. This is an idea we need to take a look at. If someone comes to Yeshua, Jesus, it is because the Father has given them to Yeshua, to Jesus. And no one can come to him unless the Father draws him. Now, this word draw is interesting. In the Greek, it means to drag, and that's kind of an interesting, because some of us he did kind of drag along to bring us to that place, and because of the drag, he gives us the idea that the person may not be entirely willing at the time to come and listen and hear what needs to be said. But this word comes from another word in the Greek, and it means to take for oneself. Okay, and that's like if you take a bride in Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 and 6. Now I want you to see this. If you look at verse 2, the angel of Yahweh, the angel of God, appeared to him there in a flame. Now, if you look at John chapter 6, verse 36, you've seen me, you do not believe. On back to Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 and 6, look at verse 3. Moses was drawn to the bush, and he just had to go look, because it was a great thing. It was an amazing thing, because this bush was on fire, yet it wasn't consuming the bush. So Moses approaches. Verse 5, Moses is told, do not come closer, and in King James, draw not nigh, because Moses needs to take off his shoes, his sandals, because the place is holy. Now, the Greek word, draw, is to approach, but it can also mean to present and to make ready. So in this case, do not present yourself maybe until you have been ready, because the place is holy. Now look carefully. Okay, let's look carefully at this. Let me move down a little bit. Let's look carefully. The one speaking is the angel of Yahweh, the angel of God, known by the majority of scholars as the pre-incarnate Yeshua, Jesus, and is telling Moses not to present himself until he'd made himself ready by removing his shoes or his sandals. If you look at Genesis chapter 16, verse 6 through 14, Hagar is sitting by spring water, and the angel of Yahweh, the angel of God, finds her and tells her she must go back. And if you look at verse 13, Hagar calls him Elohim, who sees. The Elohim, the God who sees. Okay, and so really interesting stuff. If you look at Genesis chapter 22, verses 11 through 18, Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, and the angel of Yahweh stops him, and Abraham calls that place Yahweh provides. God provides. Okay, it's Jehovah Jireh, or Jehovah Jireh, and it means God provides. Now, if you look at John 6:37, everyone the Father gives to me will come to me, which is in the Greek means to come, but also can mean to be present. And one of the Hebrew words associated with this word, it means to walk. So they will present themselves to walk with me. Okay, so there's a different idea of what that might mean, to walk with him. In Exodus chapter 14, verses 13 and 19, if you remember, Yahweh, God, did deliver them, but look closely in the passage. In Exodus 13:21, we see that Yahweh, God, led Israel by a pillar of cloud going before them. And now in Exodus chapter 14, verse 13, we see Moses telling them not to be afraid of Pharaoh, but to stand firm. The same message, okay, that he gives us today, not to be afraid of the enemy, but to stand firm. And even in when we're talking about the armor of God, he's still telling us to stand firm. The Hebrew word for stand firm is yasab, and it means to place, but it can also mean to offer, or in this case, to offer. Okay, and I'm going somewhere with this. Offer yourself to your salvation, and the Hebrew word for salvation is Yeshua. Present yourself to Yeshua. And this is kind of exciting stuff, and I love this stuff. Okay, now look at Exodus chapter 14, verse 19. The angel of Yahweh, the angel of God, who is going in front of the Israelites in the cloud, moved from the front, okay, to the back, and came between Israel and the Egyptians. And if you look at John chapter 6, verse 40, everyone who sees the Son and believes may have eternal life, and Yeshua, Jesus, will raise them up on the last day. So who's seen the Son? All of these had seen him. He had appeared to all and will appear again. But those the Pharisees was still seeing with their fleshly eyes and desiring only to follow their own teachings. And if you look at John chapter 6, verse 42, and there you go. That's what it's about. Is that the ones that really opposed him were the ones that wanted to follow their own teachings and their own thing. Now, I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really glad that you're with us today. And please push the subscribe button on the YouTube page on our channel. Give us a thumbs up on the video and leave some comments. And we'd love to be able to talk to you. We'd love to be able to dialogue with you. If you have any questions, make sure you ask those questions. You have